Hello, everyone. How is everyone today? Right, just getting all set up here. Ah, oh, hello. See, two of you are watching so far. Please take a moment to say hello and yeah, let me know how you're doing today and where you're from, all that good stuff. Let me know. Oh, really weird. I am. How you're doing today and I might have to cancel this. All that good stuff. Let's see. Hold on a second. I am getting weird. Okay, I'm getting my voice in here. I don't know if you guys are able. Can you please just take a moment to just say hi or something real quick? Because I think I'm having some technical difficulties. Let's see. Okay, my comment worked in the chat section, so we'll see. Oh, see who's watching. Yeah. Oh, good. Okay, so hello. Hi, Nicholas. I don't know why it's doing something weird. Well, I guess I think I got into it a little bit differently from how I normally do it. So I think, okay. So how are you today? Any questions you have? I was gonna record. I did record a video on this, but maybe I can save myself some editing time and talk about it now. So last week on Dr. Dan's Voice Essentials live stream. Oh, hi James, and hi 321-123. Um, nice to see you guys here. So yeah, so on Dr. Dan's live stream last week, he had Dr. Shannon Coates on, and they were talking about biases and biases in voice training in particular. And so I just want to take just a second to weigh in on that and just kind of, I guess I'm really just sort of, summarizing what they talked about. But whenever you are watching a YouTube video, watching one of mine or anybody's, whenever you are reading from a singing teacher's blog or website, whenever you're reading a book, it's really important for us to understand that that singing teacher is speaking or writing from a certain perspective and has a certain bias that kind of is peppered into the writing or the speaking. And the reason why that is the case is because we all have our own backgrounds and our own training backgrounds, and we have styles in which we sing, and we found things that work effectively for the styles in which we sing. And my own personal opinion is that a bias is neither good nor bad. It just is. It just is. And I think it's really important, though, for the reader or the viewer to understand that those biases exist. Because when we are watching a video, when we are reading a book or a website, we are going to be taking everything that that singing teacher says at heart, I guess you could say. And oftentimes a singing teacher will say, okay, well, lower the larynx and you have to have a poggio and you have to have, the sternum raised and you have to have all of these things in place. And that isn't incorrect information. If you are coming from a classical perspective, if you teach classical singing, if you are a classical singing teacher or classical singer, it is indeed accurate information and it's correct. But it's limited. It's limited really to that particular genre of singing. And again, it's neither right nor wrong. It just is. It's right for that context, I guess you could say. But then, if somebody says, hey, let the larynx rise as you go higher, and it's okay if you breathe up really, really high into the chest, that's not wrong either. It's just that particular technique will serve the styles that that singing teacher is teaching. Does that make sense? So in classical singing, you don't want to sing with the high larynx and you don't want to sing with the really, really high breath because it won't serve that particular genre of music. And but that's over here, this, let the larynx rise and whatever, it's not incorrect information. It's just limited to, again, that particular genre. So I think it's just really important for us to understand that biases do exist. And when we are reading, we have to understand the biases or the bias of the sources. So for example, I always find it kind of funny because my own website, I seem to have a classical bent, which is kind of funny because I don't sing classical music and never have. I did train with a classical teacher, but the focus was always, even though we studied classical technique, I didn't actually study classical rep, and I always led worship and was in musical theater and had my rock band. It was always how it was, and it's interesting that a lot of people assume that I'm coming from this classical bias or writing with this classical bias. And to some extent, it's true because my own pedagogy is heavily influenced by teachers who taught or teach classical singing. So your Richard Miller and Cornelius Reed and even David Jones's website have all influenced me to a large extent. And even though I know that they are classical teachers and it's not what I sing, I see a lot of value in what they write because there's a lot of accuracy in the information. Scientifically speaking, physiologically, anatomically, there's a lot of accuracy in what they're teaching. And there's great advice, even though we might have to take that advice, we'll say, with a grain of salt if we're singing in other styles, pop, rock, musical theater. Just because those precise guidelines for singing, for technique, are not going to transfer perfectly and they're not going to work as effectively necessarily in the styles that we're singing. So yeah, that's my little 2 cents, I guess, when it comes to the bias. So I'm aware of the fact that there is what seems to be a classical bias in my own writing, and I've been told that. And that's actually something that I'm working on trying to correct. I'm in the process of developing a whole new website, and I've got somebody working on that for me right now. And I'm going to be changing all the copy and making all these updates and edits, major edits. And I want to make sure that even though I still very much appreciate this, the writings of these classical teachers and still see an incredible amount of value in it, I also want to make sure that people understand, and I don't alienate those who sing in contemporary styles of music. So yeah, and I know when I'm on, when I'm here on YouTube, I try my very best to be unbiased, to try to kind of couch things in, okay, if you sing classical music, this is what you're going to do. But if you don't sing classical music and you sing this style, you're probably going to do this instead. And I think it's really important for me because of just this whole platform for me to kind of help you understand and make sense of the bias and um, yeah, make kind of weed through some of the information that might be a little bit confusing and might have you struggling to figure out what you should listen to, what sources you should listen to, because I know it can be really confusing. I know you guys are being told sometimes two completely different things or more than two things, and it can get very confusing because you don't know what to believe and what is true and what's right. And so my whole thing again is bias is neither right nor wrong, it just is, and that the information that you are being fed is not necessarily right or wrong just because you know, there isn't one that's right and one that's wrong. It depends on the context. So we contextualize our technique. All right, that's my 2 cents. Let's get on to questions. So hi James and 321-123. You do have a question. All right, yeah. I'll read it down there a little bit. Nicholas, I love your twang exercises. Oh, thank you so much. Hey, I'm actually getting ready. I'm really excited. So I have not unboxed it yet, but yesterday I got a new studio mic. Yay! I'm so excited about it. And an interface, and I'm going to get ready to start doing some recording from home. But the reason why I bring that up is because I've been having issues with the internal mic on my laptop, and whenever I get loud, as is the case with twang, or even just playing the piano, my sound cuts out, the microphone cuts out, and then people can't hear me for the next like 30 seconds or so. And so I bought this studio mic kind of wanting to also sort of kill two birds with one stone and be able to also do recording, but to be able to use it for live streams and things like that. And the reason why I bring that up is because I am planning a whole series of online workshops that are going to be open to anybody who wants to join. And one of them, actually the first one, is going to be on twang, and it's going to be like a group lesson kind of setting where we're going to gather on Zoom, and I'm going to limit it to like 20 people, and we're gonna talk about what twang is. I'm going to demonstrate it. We're going to talk about how to apply it, And then we're going to have like a group lesson. We're going to go through exercises as though you're actually in a private lesson with me, only we're going to be in a group. You will be able to mute your microphone so we don't have to hear each other sing. But then there'll be the opportunity for you guys to be able to have me listen to you sing and give you feedback directly and say, oh, okay, this is going really well. Yes, you're on the right track, or no, we need to tweak this here, so that then I feel like the information I'm giving you is actually going to be more beneficial, because now you have that direct feedback from me, from the singing teacher. So I'm really excited about that. So stay tuned. I'm actually really hoping to start this whole series by the end of this month, and I'm going to try to get a couple different workshops in before the end of the year, and then finish up in the spring. So I'm going to be covering, so I said twang. I'm going to cover like tensions, jaw, tongue tensions. I'm going to have one on mixed voice, one on belting, and I can't remember what the other one was. Oh, vocal registration. So being able to get rid of the break in the voice. So it's going to be like a group lesson kind of setting. I haven't decided if it's going to be an hour and a half or 2 hours, probably an hour and a half each time. I'm going to try to set them 2 times a week. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the same workshop on a Thursday afternoon and the same workshop on a Sunday afternoon. So that will hopefully make it possible for more people to participate. So anyway, I'm really excited about that, because it'd be great to also meet some of you who have been following this channel for a couple of years, and it'd be nice to actually work sort of one-on-one with you and also see faces. So that would be cool. Let's see. Oh, okay. Let's see. Oh, Janet is here. Janet is our moderator, and she's just going to keep an eye on things in the chat section to make sure you guys don't go rogue, go crazy. Let's see. Is it normal for me as a 16-year-old boy who can belt a B5 in mixed voice? In mixed voice, I'm assuming. A B5 is pretty high for a belt, but I don't know. I'm assuming at 16 that your post voice change. Yeah. So do you feel like you're higher voiced? If you're higher voiced, it's not completely unusual. But also, I think that there are different types of belting. I know when I'm singing, I mean, I wouldn't, like, if you listen to like Ariana Grande, I don't think she's fully in like a TA dominant function when she's belting up in the 5th octave. I think she's using a lot of compression, and I think it's creating that illusion that she's using more vocal weight than she actually is. I know when I am belting in the 5th octave, it's definitely a very twangy belt, and the twang creates that loudness for me, and it helps to create that like this nice trumpet like blasting kind of sound. But I'm not necessarily using as much weight as I would belt with on like a C5, for example. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, I can't hear you, so I don't know exactly what you're doing. So it's possible that you are just higher voiced, and that you're using a lot of compression up there, healthy, good compression. So I wouldn't say anything is like normal or not normal. So if you can do it in a healthy way, and you like how it sounds, and it serves you well, technically speaking, for the styles in which you sing, then go for it. All right, let's see. The comments are scrolling and I'm not ready. Okay, it would take a long time to develop B5. Are you saying that you have the? Oh, that was somebody responding to you, Nicholas. James, hi James. I am fully with you that good technique is good technique, but there's still a lot of people that tend to, how can I say it, think one style is better than another. Absolutely. I think it's hard. We all have biases. We all have opinions about things, and we all have preferences, like aesthetic preferences in particular. When I was growing up, I hated classical music. I thought it sounded terrible. It sounded so unnatural, and it was just, everything was so perfectly polished, and the sopranos had these grating voices, and and it's like years later, it's like I love classical music, and it's part of it was just that I had to learn to listen differently and appreciate it differently, and especially as a singing teacher, and then as a voice student first, and then a singing teacher, I developed a different appreciation for it, and just how the technical precision with which a classical singer sings. Just that alone, and just I'm so fascinated with the self-amplification aspect of it, where they're not using microphones and just the whole acoustics. It's just the more I know about it, the more amazed I am by different styles. Like even vocal distortion and such. Like it's incredible that we can create all these sounds in a sustainable, healthy way. But yeah, not everybody is going to be open to different things, and that's okay. There are styles of music that I don't particularly care for as much as I can appreciate my students singing those styles and try to help them work through it. I try to be as open minded as I can be, but let's face it, I mean, there are styles that I think sound terrible. Part of it is just the music underneath the vocals. Um, I'm not a big fan of like electronic stuff. Sorry, not to offend anybody. Um, I just like live instruments. They just sound so good. All right. Let's see. I feel like singing higher is easier for me when I sing lower. Yeah, I mean, and some singers feel that way. And Nicholas, I don't know if you're again if you're like a high tenor or countertenor, and if that's the case, then yeah, it's gonna be easier for you. It's like a soprano. Soprano just loves to live up in that high tessitura. It's just where her voice feels the best. It feels the most efficient. And that's great. And if that's where your voice wants to sit, then be good with that. Like be okay, be comfortable with that, and just embrace that. I think too often we as singers, I'm going to yell at my children in about 2 seconds. They're being really, really loud. So in about 2 seconds, guys, guys, live streaming here. Heck yeah. Shh. Love you. All right. So anyway, thank you. Shh. All right. My face is all red. I'm all embarrassed. All right. So yeah. So I think that there are too many singers that are striving to be things that they're not, and that really saddens me because I know I was somebody who was caught in that for many, many years, for a couple decades. I tried to emulate singers whose voices weren't anything like my own, and I just tried to be something that I wasn't, and it just left me feeling frustrated and discouraged and wanting to quit all the time. And so I think it wasn't until I more fully embraced my voice and started liking it for what it was that I feel like I started giving my voice permission to do more things and to be more creative and such. So just don't obsess over the pitches and that sort of stuff. Just really focus on getting your voice to function optimally, healthily, and once it's doing that, and you embrace your voice for what it is and just how it's designed, then all those doors are gonna open up for you technically and artistically, and not before then. I feel like for me artistically, it was just this uphill battle all the time when I was trying to be something that I wasn't designed to be, so to speak. I just felt like I was always trudging uphill, and it was just always like, and then I'd fall back down, and then I'd trudge back up, and it just never felt freeing, and it was hard for me to enjoy singing for a long time. I would sing, and it would just be this burden because I had these expectations of my voice, and there was no way I could meet those expectations because I had this vision for my own voice that just wasn't compatible with my natural timbre and so forth. Anyway, so I would just encourage you to just find your own voice. Don't feel like any pressure to make it into something that's not designed to be, whether that's singing higher than what's comfortable or what have you. Um, 16 maybe, see if you can sing. Yeah, just commenting to each other. Yes, please do talk amongst yourselves. Hopefully I'll be able to sing in the 5th octave forever. If it is comfortable for you and if you have good technique, and if it's, yeah, I don't see any reason why. I have a lot of male singers, even baritones, who sing comfortably into the 5th octave. It is not the place where they sit all the time. They don't live there, but they can go up, and I make sure that they are able to vocalize up that high, full voice, not flipping into like an airy falsetto, for example. And it's absolutely possible. And as long as their technique remains good and they're always aware of it and they're conscious of it, they will absolutely be able to sing like that for a very, very, very long time. It's one of those, use it or lose it things too, right? So as long as you're comfortable singing higher, psychologically comfortable, I mean, so that you actually give your voice permission to stretch to those extremes and pitches, then your voice is going to stay supple. It's going to stay flexible as you get older. Let's see. 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3. Well, I'm curious to know how you came up with that name. Does pelvic tilt affect my posture? My back actually curves a little when I raise my sternum. Yeah, so yeah, it does affect your. So the pelvic tilt, yeah. If you I'm not prepared for this today. So if you think of your pelvis like a little basin, right? So I don't know if you're talking about an anterior tilt. So if you think of like a basin, right? Here's your pelvis, like we've got the hip bones here, right? And let's say you fill it up with water, just to make it an interesting analogy. So you've got like a posterior tilt where it tilts backwards and the water spills back. And when you have that posterior tilt, you're basically tucking in your tailbone to make that happen, and you're flattening your lower back, and that will cause changes in your alignment all the way up. It's inevitable. It's unavoidable because the pelvis, I mean, your spine it's all related. It's all connected. If you have an anterior tilt where the water is spilling this way, you're going to end up basically with a sway back. You're going to be arching your lower back. So when you're talking about the sternum, I suspect that you're probably lifting it this way and arching your back, and that is causing the pelvis to tilt anteriorly, right, forward. So part of that is that when I teach the like elevation of the sternum, I just basically have my students kind of get into this tall alignment where they feel like the shoulders are out to the sides, and they feel, I mean, it's a little more complex than this, of course, but they feel this sense of stability, but also buoyancy, right? There's no stiffness, but there's a sense that they're grounded and they're stable. And then when I teach this concept of raising the sternum, I make sure that they don't take it too far. We don't want to go into this military-like posture, right? We don't want to elevate the sternum so high that it does become uncomfortable. So as soon as I do that, I feel like my muscles here gripping, and I feel that arch in the back, and I feel my pelvis starting to tilt. So if we just think of just this nice openness, the shoulders out this way, I always feel like an airline flight attendant or something. And this sense of almost like the head lifting away from the shoulders, the spine, shoulders released in here. To me, that is enough to elevate. I mean, some people think of it, like a little string kind of pulling up on the sternum, but I feel like for a lot of individuals, some but a lot, they just take that concept too far and they end up doing exactly that. They elevate. I mean, I've worked with classical singers who sang like this. The arms were always back here and the chest was up so high, and that to me would be extremely uncomfortable. Over time, their bodies adapt to it and they get used to that, but it's not. I don't think it's really the most mechanically advantageous way of singing, I guess, because when you do that, it becomes more difficult, I think, for us to get the ribs opened up the way we want them to. And then, when we've got this sway back from that, then I feel like it puts the abdominal musculature out of place to be able to help us, balance and provide that, that and muscle antagonism with the intercostal muscles. So, to the best of your ability, try to achieve more of a neutral pelvic position. When you do that, that means that the spine is going to have the curves where it's supposed to have the curves. And I think that you're going to get more freedom, more range of motion with the ribs. They're going to be able to open more freely, and you're just going to be more comfortable. So hopefully that helps. Let's see. Voices tend to change. So yes, yeah, James, voices do change, absolutely, and especially women's voices. I find just because when we go through like premenopause and menopause, there's definitely a thickening of the parts of our mechanism of our apparatus, and so that's why, generally speaking, especially higher voices, they tend to lower a little bit. Um, but I find I've worked with some singers who have extremely healthy voices in their 60s, and but that's because they've kept up with it. And it doesn't mean that they haven't gone through any changes, but their voices are still really healthy and they're still flexible and they're still strong and they're still able to do a lot of things, even if they can't quite sing in the highest tessitures that they used to be able to. But it's just a use it or lose it thing. Hi, Janet. That's all you need then as a teacher to know what the individual singer needs as appropriate for the genre in which they sing. Yeah, I mean, yeah, so it's one of those things. It's like if somebody's never trained in classical singing, you probably don't want any. And if you aspire to be a professional classical singer, you probably don't want to go to that teacher. That teacher, even if that teacher teaches functional training, like does functional training where the focus is really on getting the instrument to function optimally, um, there are things that a non-classical teacher without any kind of classical training just cannot teach you. And I say this from my own perspective too, is that I work with classical singers, but when I work with them, it's in sort of a rehabilitative kind of situation where they are struggling with vocal health issues, and I help them work through those vocal health issues. Or sometimes they're struggling through the upper range or something to that effect. They're struggling with a break or something in their voices, technically speaking, that I can help them with. But can I help them with foreign language diction outside of French? Not really. Am I intimately familiar with all the classical rep for their particular voice type that's out there? Not really. Um, and I'm just being honest about that. That I can't be all things to all people, and I would rather be expert in a certain area than try to be like you sort of like the than be the master of none. You know, like or what is it? The what's that expression? The what is that? You do a lot of things sort of in a mediocre way, and but you're master of none. Oh, I can't think of that expression. Anyway, so I would rather be more of like a contemporary voice specialist or something to that effect, or somebody who, you know, in my case, I kind of see myself as sort of um, somebody who works through helps a lot of singers work through vocal health issues. That's a huge part of what I do, and why people come to me for private lessons is that they're working on. I work with speech students as well as singing students, and sometimes they are just there to try to figure out how to use their voices in a healthy way. You know, they have to use their voices for their jobs, and maybe they're dealing with vocal health issues, and so that's where I know I can help them, and that's where I want to get. You know, I want to keep up my skills and just keep honing those skills because I think it's better for me to step back and acknowledge that there are other teachers who do something in a given area of voice training better than I do. And I'm okay with that. Like, I don't feel like I have to have a monopoly on singing students in the world. I want students who are going to come to me who are going to that I can help, that I know I have the skills and the expertise to help them. And that's what I would rather have than somebody coming to me asking me to teach them to be a world class opera singer and me failing them. That's when I refer out. I have plenty of singing teacher friends. You know, I'm part of a great singing teacher co-op, and if I feel as though something, you know, a student comes to me with training needs that are outside the scope of my own expertise, I have no problems whatsoever referring those students to those other teachers. And I think that's how it should be. I think that we can. I know a lot about classical singing in theory, but there are again certain areas of classical singing that I don't have time to become expert in. Like I just rep that sort of stuff. Anyway, I know I'm babbling on today endlessly. I tend to do that, don't I? Let's see. Elma, M, hi. Nice to see you. Are you new? I don't know if I've ever seen you, or at least you've never made a comment, I think, before. Your name is unfamiliar. Yes, can't wait. Oh, for the twang thing? I'm probably really behind, aren't I? That was like a half hour ago. Okay. Let's see. I sang Chandelier. It hits a G sharp 5, but I would love it if you could tweak and tell me what I need to fix with my singing and mixed voice. Yeah. Well, so yeah, when I do those workshops, I think you're gonna find that that will help tremendously because we're gonna actually go through it like we're having a lesson. And you're going to have exercises. I'm actually going to play through the exercises instead of, I know here I just kind of play it 2, 3 times as a demonstration and leave the rest up to you, but we're going to go through it like an actual lesson. We're going to go through the full range. Um, yeah, so yeah, I'll take a listen. You're always welcome to send me a sample of your singing as well. I can't promise that I will answer, like, respond promptly because I'm really bad with email. Sorry. Sorry to anybody who's still waiting on responses from me. Let's see. Linda, hi Linda. Nice to see you. Isn't it like early in the morning or something for you, Linda, in Tasmania? Are you interested in any Indian classical? Absolutely. I've actually worked with a number of Indian singers who sing like Carnatic music, and yeah, so I love Indian classical Indian music. I think it's incredible. It requires so much agility. It's incredible to be able to flip the voice like that and such. So yeah, I've worked with several singers who teach it, so it's I actually really like the style. so let's see, Janet, Linda, I first knew you while you were back in Jeff Roca group. Yes. Is Jeff Roca still doing his live streams? Because I was thinking about him yesterday, because I know I used to be able to catch it just before I left dance, and I don't know if I'm missing them or not, but anyway. Let's see. Hello, Janet. Everybody saying hello. Um, for giving advice. Oh, you're very welcome. Stephen, hello. I don't know if I've ever seen you on here either. See, I'm a male country pop artist. I'm concerned my chest voice has become weak due to transitioning and thinning earlier, as early as middle C to get into mix. Um, I don't know what your voice type is. I wouldn't say middle C is necessarily really early, depending on your voice type. If you're a tenor, it's probably a little early. If you're more of a baritone, not too bad. But I would encourage you though to stretch the chest voice a little bit in a healthy way. That's really the key there. Um, you want to be able to use the call of the voice, at least in training. You're not necessarily going to sing with this pure chesty voice. That's not really an ideal mixed voice. But you know that Melissa Cross exercise where she does those 3 rainbows, and I've demonstrated this before in previous, where you sing whoa, and that the first rainbow is kind of shorter, and it's not as high in terms of pitch. And then the second rainbow goes a little higher and it's a little bit longer. And then the third rainbow goes higher yet. And you're doing this all in chest voice, and you kind of just randomly pick your pitches. So it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I think she stops at the top. I like to go back down because I don't want anybody sitting on that. Sometimes I find singers panic a little bit when they're like, oh, I'm in chest voice and I'm loud. And hopefully I didn't cut out my volume. I know again the microphone is really bad on it. But next live stream I'm gonna have figured out how to set up my new studio mic, so that'll be fun. So yeah, so doing stuff like that where you're encouraging your voice to just stretch and stay strong, and then also bringing the voice down, the thinner edge function of the voice, bringing that down, having that little crossover area, I think is really important because you don't want to overweigh the voice, like you don't want to weigh it down too much to the point where the voice becomes too inflexible, too heavy, too heavily weighted. So yeah, just even if you're not using it in a lot of your singing, I think it's really good. Just even a few times a day, do like the whoa or something, and encourage yourself to sort of stretch that chest range just a little bit, but not at all costs. Not if it feels uncomfortable. When I do the whoa, I get into that yell resonance coupling where my voice just sort of locks and fixes into this really really efficient way of vocalizing on that yell. Like when we yell, it usually feels good. Like I don't feel anything in here. My throat feels passive. The resonance feels like it's really secure. If that makes sense. So yeah, I would just encourage you to do something like that and just keep stretching it. But and also, I mean, artistically, I think you want options, right? So if you're transitioning at middle C all the time, then you might come across situations, especially pop music, where that won't work. That won't work for the song or the style sometimes. Usually the song, So if you can't transition later. If you can't bridge later, then it limits you artistically. So I think it is good to try to find a way to build the strength into the voice in a very healthy way. Oh, my kids are driving me nuts. They're supposed to be quiet. Soraya. Sorry. All right. See. Oh, Cockney Rebel. Hi. How are you? That's all right. Oracle. What's the Oracle? What's that? Did I miss something? Stephen. Also, I understand the swallowing muscles are under the chin, but when I sing, should I feel any squeeze on the muscles directly to both sides of the larynx? I don't know if you're talking about like the sternocleidomastoid muscles right here. Those are the most common muscles that squeeze. Um, it depends. It depends. Those muscles are partly postural, so sometimes just if we're moving our head certain ways, we can feel and see them kind of pop out a little bit. If you know, sometimes when we have like head forward postures and stuff, we can see all these muscles doing these things that we think could be potentially unhealthy or a sign of unhealthy vocal technique, but it's not always the case. Um, I, if you really seeing them pop out a lot and you're seeing the larynx kind of sink in, that's generally a sign that you're using extraneous muscle. You're using too much of the like extrinsic musculature to kind of usually to sort of brace the larynx and to stabilize it. And if that's the case, you'll probably also feel a sense of inflexibility in the voice. The voice won't move the way you want it to move. And you probably will also feel a sense of soreness and or fatigue in the voice. Oftentimes, when singers are aware of a sense of tension or squeeze, my children, they don't understand this concept of mommy has to work. So let's see. So Nicholas, I was doing karaoke yesterday and I was covering Titanium by Sia in the original key. Okay. Yeah, no, I think we think you're higher voiced, right? And the right side of my throat is like sore slash hurts when I swallow. Do you have any tips for tips? Oh, I've been drinking tea all day. Um, I don't know why it's sore. I don't know what you did, and you said the one side. Um, hmm. That's when I would go. If it persists, I would go see an ENT and have somebody take a look at that. The other thing that I would recommend is just doing some simple massage because it just could be that you've got muscles that are a little bit tighter. There are times like my larynx kind of pops when I'm drinking. Sometimes it just like clicks, 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 and sometimes if I just kind of do a little bit of like just taking my fingers around either side of the larynx and just encouraging the cartilages and such to just kind of become more flexible. I feel like I don't get as much of that, and I also watch my alignment when I'm drinking, which sounds silly, but if I drink off to the side, for example, I'll tend to get more of that clicking. Um, so yeah, so I would just kind of do some massage. I've got a video on my channel in which I talk about those suprahyoid muscles, and then I list a number of exercises that's supposed to help stretch and massage these muscles here as well in the front of the neck, not just the ones under the chin, and that may help along with the larynx too. If the soreness is because your larynx was operating from a place of stiffness. Otherwise, if it persists again for a couple more days, I would go see an ENT for sure. Let's see. Thank you, Jack of all trades. I was trying to think it's like something, 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 and I was like, it's a name, it's a name. Okay, thank you so much, Linda. Thank you. Yes, Jack of all trades, master of none. That's it. Cockney Roll, listen to some of the high notes in it. Okay. So do you work with damaged voices? I do. Actually, about half of my students are dealing right now with vocal health issues and injuries. So it's a large part of what I do. I am not a speech language pathologist. I will say that up front. I am not a medical professional, but I do use a lot of speech language pathology principles and exercises and such. And we, use singing, we use speech. I try to help to identify what's going on, and I do work concurrently with their speech language pathologist or their laryngologist or ENTs. We will sometimes chat professionally with each other too to kind of come up with a good um, training approach or plan. So yeah, Let's see. Hardly any bloody wonder made. Oh, okay, you're responding to each other. I don't think I can follow the conversation. Linda, hey Janet. Talking to Janet. Cockney Rebel. I agree, Karen. You don't try and teach stuff you don't know about. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I think there's been some talk in one of the voice teacher forums that I'm on Facebook. Somebody posted a quote maybe a month ago or something about I forget who the quote was from. I don't know if Dan Mitten happens to be listening. Dan Mitten was the bass that I interviewed last year or earlier this year, uh, sometime a while ago. And he was the one who posted. I should just ask him about it. But it just basically said that a lot of people feel like when they're first starting out, they're just beginners, so they shouldn't really invest a lot of money into their voice training. And it's actually kind of backwards thinking that when they're first starting out is when they actually should be investing more into their training, because they you don't want to like work with a singing teacher who is guiding you in the wrong direction. And if you're doing that, then you have to go back and unlearn bad habits and bad technique. You want to actually start out with somebody who's going to give you a super, super strong foundation, technically speaking. And then as you get more experienced, you'll probably need lessons less and less. And you might still want to invest in great singing teachers, but you may need them less, and you'll also be more aware of what you're doing technically when things feel right and when they sound right and what have you. So I think it is important for us to go to the right teachers right away. And I will tell students up front again that there are things that I am not expert in. If you want to learn about things like vocal distortion and extreme vocal sounds, I am not the teacher for you. I know in theory how to create these sounds, and I kind of work on them a little bit, but I don't even have time to work on them a lot in my own voice, my own singing. So I will refer those singers to other teachers. I know a couple other teachers who are experts in these, in those sounds, and I have no issue saying, go over there. You're going to get a much, much healthier, more solid training than what you'll get with me in vocal distortion. So let's see. Callum's here. Callum or Caleb? I never know. So because you got the two L's there, so that makes the first syllable a closed syllable. So theoretically, it should be a short vowel. And I'm getting all nerdy and geeky with you. All right. Hi there. I have a little trouble with my mixed voice being a little too chesty, high up in my range. But when I try to back off the sound and incorporate more head voice, I get this slightly odd to my ear sound, which only goes away when I push more chest through. Should I continue to explore the buzzy sound? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what's going on exactly, but if you do, and we're going to explore this with my workshops with the twang and the mixed voice and the registration workshops. We're going to explore how to create that nice seamless transition between the registers, how to thin the vocal folds without losing the compression in the sound. And one of the things that I would encourage you to do if you're having troubles with the too much weight is to do more things like the NG. Do those little sirens on the NG. You want to make sure that the tongue is fronted on the NG, that you're feeling a lot of, you're feeling space and freedom back there, that the tongue is kind of out of the way of the throat. So you're getting that really nice ring. And then when you move up in pitch, you want to make sure that that tongue isn't moving back farther and you're not going and swallowing that tongue. But things like that are great because if you start from chest voice and you siren up into head voice, and you work to maintain the same compression instead of going right, that flip. You fight through that, right? When I say fight through, I don't mean squeeze, I don't mean strain, but this sense of you want to release, you want to just kind of give up, but being able to. I'm not going getting all airy with it. I'm leaning into that sound. I'm keeping the compression of the sound without dragging out excess weight. That's one of the exercises I would encourage you to do is that just NG, a siren, or even a scale. But sirens are great because they really help us in, that flexibility. I would go slowly with the sirens actually because I feel like when singers go fast with the sirens, they tend to kind of skip over the treble notes and they tend to flip more than when they go slowly and they figure out they feel that sense of fine adjustment that happens along the way. That's that adjustment that you need to get used to and being able to do it more readily and more precisely and more consistently. So yeah, just yeah. But I hope you'll come to the workshops. I think that will help a lot. We'll go through like several exercises, and again, I'll have a chance to listen to you if you're comfortable doing that. Let's see. Lauren, hi. What are your recommendations for overcoming performance anxiety? I have an upcoming solo at the end of this month, and I find myself having difficulty trying to control the anxiety. Such a tough one, isn't it? I do have a whole video on performance anxiety that I would encourage you to check out after this. It's kind of a longer video, but I've got all my strategies because I talk about I have performance anxiety in everyday life, like daily tasks, making phone calls to strangers, just everything to me is anxiety inducing. And I don't like people watching me cook or do anything. So I understand performance anxiety very well, all too well. My big things are preparation, just which I know is everybody says that, right? But I feel like when you're more prepared, you have less to worry about, right? So making sure that you know your song inside out thoroughly, that you're technically prepared to sing the song or songs that you've chosen. You said it's a solo, right? So I'm assuming it's one song. So making sure that you're technically able to. Is it in the right key? Because if you're concerned about the notes that you're going to be singing, if you're like I can't sing that particular note, then you're going to be concerned. You're going to be anxious about it, right? Whereas if you pick a song or a key where you have technical security, you with beyond a shadow of a doubt that you can sing that note, then you're going to go into the performance with more confidence. When you go in with more confidence, then you feel like there's less of a chance for things to go wrong, and you're not going to be stressing about that note coming up in the song. Um, I've done it before where I've had not particularly high notes, but notes that just for whatever reason I just didn't like how they sounded or what have you. And I know that I'd be anticipating those notes in the phrases before it, and then I find myself unable to really be in the moment and really connect with the music and the emotion of the lyrics and such. So it becomes a distraction, not just to the audience, but to you when you're singing and you're concerned about a certain part of the song or what have you. So my thing is, yeah, like make sure you know your song thoroughly, be thoroughly prepared, be technically ready, and even if that means lowering the key of a song or raising the key of a song if the you know bottom end is too low, or if it just kind of it's sitting. Let's say you have a register break that's just not worked out yet. Maybe shifting it up a step or two or down a step or two sometimes puts it in a different spot that makes it so much easier and so we can be more confident going in. Um, and yeah, in that video, I talk about a lot of different strategies, including even just like dressing comfortably so that we eliminate or reduce the possibility of things like wardrobe malfunctions, or so that we're comfortable and hydrating and getting lots of sleep. And the fact of the matter is, though, that stage nerves are real and they're probably going to be there the day of the performance, and that's normal and it's healthy. So yeah, just sometimes we have to give ourselves some grace as well, and we have to just um, be more focused on the audience than on ourselves, which is really hard, especially when you're first starting out. And like I'm one of those people who just has this internal monologue all the time, and I'm just always talking to myself about what's going on as I'm performing. And it took me a long time to kind of be able to stop talking to myself and just start putting my attention on the audience and trying to make sure that the audience feels at home and welcomed in, and it's just being entertained like I'm a hostess at a party, and these are my friends that I'm entertaining. And I think when we start turning the focus off of ourselves and more onto the audience, that really helps a lot. But yeah, go check out that video. I think it's just I think it's under performance anxiety or stage fright. It might even be. I don't like to use stage fright because to me, stage fright usually implies that we're completely frozen with fear to the point where we're like not able to sing and or we're running off stage. Um, Performance anxiety to me, I think is more accurate. All right. Let's see. I don't know if I know how to pronounce your name. Gaurav. Again, love from India. Oh, about the Indian music. Yeah, is it Carnatic music that we're talking about here? Ah, I lost you again. Oh man. I'm always like falling so behind. Oh dear. Okay, I'm gonna pick up the pace. I'm too chatty. Oh my gosh. Sorry guys. It didn't seem to be Oh dear. All right. I'm gonna start moving through this really, really quickly. Ta-da. All right. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm really behind on these. Okay. Um, so glad to hear that you know. Okay. I don't know how to pronounce that. Me too. I can sing anything over and above G4 in full voice. Yeah, because Cockney, like you feel like you're like a counter tenor, right? Is that what you're thinking? After that, I'm definitely falsetto. Okay. Ain't that basically what belting is? What, like yelling? See, I always have issues with that. So I was one of those people who didn't belt when I was younger. It didn't come naturally to me, and I'm so sorry about my kids. So I did the whole, hey, it's just it's just soft yelling, it's musical yelling and stuff. And I always tried to approach it from that, and I was able to stretch my chest voice range up into the fifth octave, well up into the fifth octave. Comfortable, it feels fine. It just is inflexible. It just always just sounds like a yell. And then I started really working more on more of a twangy mix and building my belt from more of a mixed voice where there is a lot of compression, but it's not an inflexible coordination. And that's when I started making real progress with my own belting. Um, so, but yeah, everybody says it's kind of a soft yell, and I mean, I guess you can kind of say it is. Let's see, sorry, I have your name. Let's see, the oracles. What are if you know everything? Oh, I don't know everything. I wish I knew everything. Um, I'm okay. Most of you are talking to yourself, so I feel like I don't feel so bad. I haven't missed like a ton of different questions. So, is it possible to sing only with twang, mixed voice? Because I can get low and high with what Ariana Grande does. I sing mainly pop songs. Um, yeah, I mean, if you listen to really, really good singers, and again, I was one of those people who fell prey to what some people were trying to tell everybody about, oh, in contemporary singing, we only sing in chest voice. You almost never hear any kind of M2 coordination, which is not the case at all. And the more and more I listen to singers, and the more and more I kind of reverse engineer their sounds, I realize that they're singing in this really flexible, mixy kind of sound most of the time. And oftentimes that includes being in an M2 coordination, like M2, we'll say head voice dominant sound, but then they're keeping their vowels very speech like, and they're keeping a fair bit of compression in the sound, but not necessarily TA compression. There are different types of compression, and that's creating this very natural speech like kind of sound that we hear in a mixed voice, but it's not necessarily all chest voice. um, Musical theater, for example, is a great example of that, where you know the aim, unless you're belting, the aim is to be in this kind of mixed voice and to let the voice transition to an M2 when it needs to. And you're just really keeping everything really speaky and very kind of, we'll say, fronted with the resonance. So, be a sore throat. Let's see. Good. So, it's mostly you guys chatting with each other, so that's great. That was one of the only songs. How do you feel your vocals are swollen or damaged? Mike, yeah, thanks for your question. So I have a couple of videos on that topic too, in which I demonstrate when my vocal folds were swollen from. I actually had pertussis. I had whooping cough, and so there was a lot of coughing, a lot of very aggressive coughing involved, and I didn't record the video right away. So I only had half of the swelling had gone down, but you'll hear depends on the type of damage that you're dealing with, but you'll usually hear a change in quality. If you have swollen vocal folds, you will tend to get like a delayed onset of sound. So you'll try to start the sound and it starts like a split second later than you're wanting it to, expecting it to. You may not be able to sing high or in a certain part of your range. You may not be able to sing softly, especially if it's swelling. With the swelling, it's like edema. You've got like this fluid basically on the tissues, and it weighs the vocal instrument down. So in order to get the vocal folds vibrating, you tend to have to use more air. Um, and that's exactly the time when you don't want to be using your voice a lot because you'll tend to develop compensatory techniques. And that can be potentially unhealthy. And I've actually worked with singers who have been sick, even just a cold or bronchitis or something to that effect, where, months after they've officially recovered from it. The virus is gone, the bacteria is gone, and yet they're still dealing with the vocal health issues because they tried singing through some of that and they ended up doing different things and using their voice differently to compensate. And then they have troubles undoing those bad habits. So that's the time for, I won't necessarily say voice rest, like you can do just gentle hums, for example, just gentle phonation. I would say, like, if it's really, really sore, and obviously go see an ENT or a laryngologist, please. That should always be, if it's something that's continuing, it's persisting for more than a few days, um, or if you've been sick with a really severe cough, maybe more than a week or two, then please go see somebody who is a specialist in this field and can scope you and see what's going on, just to assess the nature of the damage. But yeah, it changes in voice quality, changes, like if it's like a more of a fatigue thing, you might fatigue more readily, and you might not be able to kind of continue as you sing as you ordinarily do for as long as you ordinarily do, or as intensely as you ordinarily do. Let's see. So I've been off allergy medicines for like 3 weeks now, and interestingly enough, I'm noticing very little difference. Um, I'm trying to make some changes. I got this allergy testing this past week. I don't know if you can still see it, but I had these giant splotches like from mold, like they injected under there, and it's really gross. Um, I don't know why I'm telling you all this, but I still have a lot of postnasal drip, so I'm like as I'm talking. Let's see. I'm gonna just kind of reading through these really quickly. Do you work via Skype? Yes, Toma. I'm gonna say Toma. Yes, I do. I actually don't use Skype anymore. I use Zoom video conferencing. It's really the same idea. What I do like about Zoom is I find that the quality is a little bit better. I can get a nice side by side. We can also record our lessons without any external software. It's not necessary. And we can also do chat and everything else that's in there. And I can actually have you record the lesson from your end onto your own laptop, so you have that to play back later on, so that you remember the exercises and the advice that I gave you. Um, and I do use Skype as a backup if, for whatever reason, somebody can't get onto Zoom and they can't figure out the technology. But it's really easy. When students book a lesson with me, they get my direct link to my permalink to my Zoom account. The curse of being a bloody baritone. Let's see. Cornelius. Um, Keep belting the fifth octave into your 20s, 30s, or even later. Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, healthy technique is healthy technique, right? So if you're using healthy technique, and I think you need to conserve your voice to some extent. When I say, so you can have really, really healthy technique, but be somebody who's always belting, always singing intensely. And there is a risk there that your voice, it's just more wear and tear on the voice, even if you're doing it correctly. So I always say, it's like make sure that you're always, switching things up. That if you're singing in the high tessitura a lot, make sure that you don't neglect the lower tessitura, that you keep working on the lower part of your range. And then also don't always sing intensely. Make sure that you're giving yourself opportunities to sing softly. Um, Without breathiness, preferably, so that you can learn to be able to connect the vocal folds at the thin edges without having to use air to do that. So Healthy singing, yes, definitely for a long time, which is the equivalent of about, oh, sorry, I can belt in fifth octave, 20, which is the equivalent of about a high alto mezzo. Yeah. Um, Head voice is more connected sound. Yes, it is compared to falsetto. That's how I define it. Is that head voice definitely has the vocal folds are fully together, so you get a stronger sound source signal. More overtones are represented in the sound, whereas falsetto, it's there's usually a gap in the glottis, and there tends to be a little bit of air. It can be more or less depending on the singer. My children are just so loud today. Normally they go upstairs or downstairs when I'm doing live streams, but today they've chosen for some reason to stay in the same at the same level of the house. Falsetto, soft and breathy. With the song of the duet, there are two parts. If I missed something, head voice be like Whitney Houston. These classical terminology. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not head voice is a classical terminology, but I mean, it's still widely used in CCM styles. People have tried to get to the M1, M2, but we feel like it still doesn't accurately define what's going on with registration. So we won't get into a whole nomenclature debate at all. The accent rose, yeah. Well, there's that whole, the late '80s to mid '90s, the hair metal guys, like the Axl Roses. They all had this like high falsetto. Um, they're mostly baritones, and they're all singing in this really high range, and it was often this kind of scratchy, almost like whining kind of falsetto. Like I'd say almost a twang, but not quite. There was definitely a certain style that they had with their falsetto, whereas today, like you hear a pop singer's falsetto, it sounds very different. So they're very different sounds, different aesthetics. Just like with belting, there are different aesthetics with belting. There are different aesthetics, I think, with falsetto, depending on you know how open the glottis is, for example, and other things too. Earth, wind, and fire. Yeah. But is it possible to do an M2 falsetto that is not the least bit breathy? So if you went to, so some people describe that as like a reinforced falsetto. I think acoustically speaking, it might be more of like a whoop timbre. Woo-hoo, woo, woo, woo. When you get to that sound where I'm completely connected, there's no air coming out, and I can do that pretty softly. Obviously, I'm female, so it's not going to sound the same as it would for a guy in the same pitch range. But I would say that when you hear what sounds like a reinforced falsetto, it's probably like whoop timbre. We won't get into the acoustics of that, but so if you find yourself like if you can do like that whoop timbre and get into that like that woohoo, you could sing with a much cleaner, clearer falsetto sound. Oftentimes it sounds more falsetto-like, not just because you're using the thin edge of the vocal fold, but also because the vowel itself tends to modify when you're doing that. So it tends to modify in the direction of what you might hear with the falsetto sound. Oh, I hope I'm not really, really behind, guys. Let's see. Oh, here. Oh, that is what countertenors do. Yes, in fact, it's possible to have an overcompressed falsetto. Absolutely. Cornelius, if you watch my interview with Dr. Ian Howell, so he is a professional countertenor, and he works at the New England Conservatory, and I've actually got some samples of him singing on there, and you can hear it. I mean, there are lots of countertenors that you could listen to, good countertenors. It's a very clean sound. Classical singing, falsetto is not considered an acceptable timbre. It's not considered a professionally viable timbre unless you're using it for comedic effect or something like that. So what's created, and I think it was part of the conversation that Ian and I had before I started, or I was recording the whole thing, but I think I edited that out. Just felt like it wasn't exactly 100% relevant or pertinent to the conversation. But we talked about different types of compression and how there is the TA compression that provides that medial compression. It's the muscular body of the vocal folds kind of compressing from the middle. But then we've also got like the LCAs, lateral cranial rytminoids, and from back here providing compression, and they provide compression from different angles. And I think it's entirely possible to release those chest voice muscles, the TA muscles, thyrorytminoid muscles, and compress differently. And I've experienced this in my own singing. I definitely feel like a shifting that happens um, progressively, but definitely in a certain section of my range. And I feel a passing of the proverbial baton, so to speak, when it comes to the compression. Whereas, if I want to keep a similar sound, it starts to feel different in terms of how I compress. And so I think that's what you're talking about there, is exactly what Ian and I were talking about, was because there is that belief, and people have been talking for so many years and calling countertenors falsettists, so that they sing entirely in falsetto, and it's a kind of a reinforced falsetto. They're not always in whoop timbre. They're not always singing in what might be medically defined as falsetto. That is, a production that has a gap in the vocal folds or in the glottis. So I think you're spot on there. I think you're onto something. Team 28 Pro. Hi, my name is Jonathan. Should I be feeling any nasal pressure at all when singing in my mixed voice? Maybe. um, so I think it depends. I don't know if you're feeling, when you say nasal pressure, I don't know if you're feeling a sense of just ring and like vibration there, or are you actually feeling air pressure through the nasal passages? Um, a lot of singers do, especially going through the transition area between registers, they do slightly lower the soft palate to allow a little bit of resonance through. When we're training mixed voice and twang, we tend to use a lot of nasal consonants, the NGs and the M's and N's, and twang will allow it to get kind of nasalized sometimes because it can ease that transition. So I don't know if what you're feeling is an actual uh, just the vibration, the sympathetic vibration with, associated with resonance where the bones begin to vibrate, or if you're feeling pretty fly. All right. So, or if you're feeling the resonance actually going through the nasal passages. So I think it depends on what's going on. But yeah, it's you may or may not feel it. When I am singing in musical theater styles and I'm singing, like, for me, I don't have a lot of natural brightness in my voice, so when I'm singing certain songs, I have to really crank up that twang to make a sound that is more professionally viable. And there are times when I feel a little bit of what feels like pressure in my nose, and if I pinch my nose, there's no resonance actually, like there's no air filtering out through the nose. So but I sometimes am aware of that sense of buzz here, so I don't know if that's what you're feeling, but play around with it. Pinch your nose when you're sustaining a tone, or singing through something without a nasal consonant, and see if the sound changes. Right, if it's, that's really nasalized. But yeah, that's one way to check to find out if that's what's going on. Otherwise, it could just be, a little bit of just the buzz, the vibration. Let's see. All right, so it's after 5 o'clock here, so I'm probably going to wrap up in just a few minutes. I'll see if I can get through any more questions. Falsetto can be like Mitch Cassie. Yeah, he's got a beautiful countertenor technique, I would say. I know some people would disagree with me because he's not a classical singer with classical training, but he connects so nicely up there. If you heard his performance at the Very Wicked Halloween, is the official title of it. Where or not, sorry, not Mitch Grassi. I was thinking, yeah, Mitch. Sorry, I am getting really confused. I've been at this too long. Anyway, yeah. So if you hear some of that upper range stuff, like it's so connected, and it's more mixy than it is like falsetto. So yeah, I think it's entirely possible, but he is definitely a higher voiced male. So you're going to hear more of that than you will with like a baritone, for example. Um, Not that a baritone can't use similar techniques, but it's just not going to sound the same. The thing falsetto always vibrates in the entire mucosa, whereas head voice has a lower body cover ratio. The head voice imitates falsetto, not the reverse. Um, let's see. Oh yeah, Ariana Grande is very breathy. And if women have falsetto, if you think of it like if you think there's a lot of argument about whether or not females have falsetto, because we think of falsetto as being imitative of the sounds of the female upper range. So how can females imitate the female upper range when we are females? But in any case, yeah, I would say that if you consider breathiness and that sort of almost distorted vowel, I would say it's closer to a falsetto for sure. Um, but I mean, she is known for having very poor diction, and I don't know if that is what assists her in singing higher. And sometimes it's just kind of letting go of the vowel and letting go of the diction. I don't know. It's interesting. Let's see. Ariana Grande does both light belting and false. Yeah. See, she's not. Yeah, you're right. She's not a heavy belter by any means. Cornelius. Let's see. How is Sing Voice Academy working? How is it going, or how does it work? It's going well. It's it's a lot to keep up with sometimes. So for anybody who doesn't know, I have Sing Voice Academy, which is a subscription based, like a membership based group, and we basically do monthly online group lessons, and I record videos and modular training in which I try to introduce technical concepts sort of systematically, which is kind of hard to do in a video setting. And then singers are able to post their videos and be able to give them feedback. Sometimes I jump on and do a live response to that, or sometimes I'll pre-record a lesson related to that. So it's a way of being able to work with me without the having to show up every week for lessons with me. So it's good. It's a really nice group that we have, very supportive, and I think we're having a good time. I think we're learning and growing and getting more comfortable with each other. A lot of over half the group I think has been comfortable enough to post videos of themselves singing, so that's good. But there's no such thing as a falsetto approaching head voice. It's just a matter of finding flow, phonation, and your M2. Let's see. Any other questions? Okay, now I have a teacher and I do. My nose is itchy. I know. Stupid allergies still. All right. I think I'm losing you guys. Let's see. The lateral cricoarytenoids abduct the vocal folds, whereas the interarytenoids adduct. Yeah. Yeah. So the point is that we get compression from different places. It's not all like, I think some teachers teach this idea that the only compression that you get is from the TAs. And if the TA is released, then there's no possibility of getting any kind of compression in the sound and keeping the vocal folds together, which I disagree with, and Dr. Ian Howell does as well. Yeah. So happy to see you again. How are you doing today? Oh, hi, Samuel. Nice to see you too. I haven't seen you in a while. I tend to ask you this always. Have you found a new song you like recently? You're the only person I think who asked me those questions. So what do you like about it? What does it make you special for you? So I actually just purchased last week, I purchased the soundtrack for Bandstand. I had a student a little while back. He's a professional musical theater actor, and he used one of the songs, the Donnie Nowitzki Accordion Genius. So he used that for an audition, and that's where I had really, this is a while back now, and I had first heard about Bandstand. So there are a couple songs in there that I'm thinking, not typically my style of musical theater, but it kind of sits between this old like big band sound and more contemporary sound. So it's not quite, So I'm like, I might be able to pull it off. So yeah, there are a couple of I can't think of the actual official names of the songs, but there are a couple of the lead songs there that I might try learning. That's where I'm at right now. And I attended a show, Tuck Everlasting last night, which I was already very familiar with, and I sing those songs because apparently I sound like an 11-year-old child when I sing. I sing all the, I sing that whole soundtrack a lot. So I went to go see that production last night. It was very, very well done. I was very impressed through this award-winning youth production, this youth company. So let's see. To get an efficient cartilaginous adduction, both must be used. I agree that you're not going to like completely lose the TAs, but at some point, yeah, I mean, you get to a point where the TAs just kind of become less and less engaged. Yeah, absolutely. I think that they're both are necessary for sure, Cornelius. I honestly don't think you can learn to sing properly without the help of a fully qualified singing teacher. I agree. I mean, you're getting help somewhere anyway. All right. Wow, we've been on for a while, guys. All right. I mean, try to perform a pretty little gymnastics routine without the proper training, would you? No, no, you wouldn't. I would not define falsetto as a gap in the vocal folds. I would call that a breathy phonation. It is a breathy phonation type, but again, there are different aesthetics with falsetto, and medically speaking, falsetto actually has that little phonatory gap. That's how it's defined more so in the medical community and the singing community. I mean, we're dealing with multiple things. It's not just a physiological phenomenon. We're also dealing with the acoustical, which the medical community doesn't deal with. So that, I think it becomes more complex because we're also dealing with the harmonics and the formants and the interactions with air and breath and all sorts of other things too. So, yeah, but I mean, that's basically how it's defined medically. So that's kind of what I go with. Again, because there are so many different aesthetics, right? There's that reinforced falsetto, which tends to be more of like a whoop timbre. So many different types. There's that raspy kind of falsetto that kind of sounds a little bit like a cat. Yeah. All right. Let's see. I would also define falsetto as a registration in which the thyroretinoid muscle is relaxed and the cricothyroid engaged. Yes. And the oscillation occurs. Yes. And yeah, that's actually absolutely true. Yeah, I'll get in the car and be like, I know how to drive without having the proper instruction. Absolutely. I agree, but you don't need to know the intricate details of the inner workings of the human anatomy to be able to learn to run, play, or sing. It should be natural to some extent. I agree. I mean, with the exception of sounds that we don't make on a daily basis, just because we just don't, I think that what usually happens is we start to use our voices and we operate them from a place of interference. And that's where I think it becomes problematic. So I do think that our voices are designed to do these things. I do think that they are natural. Um, but I think as soon as we start trying to make it into this refined art form, that's when we start tinkering a lot and we start manipulating and then we start to interfere, and once we interfere, then the voice stops being able to function as freely and as effectively. So yeah, it'd be nice if we could all just kind of turn off that part of ourselves and just sing, and it's hard. Let's see. All right, I'm gonna wrap up, guys. I know this is lots of comments today. You guys are having a great little chat in here. The vocal nodules build up gradually, and you can stop when warning signs appear and be fine. The primary risk would be lesions, which can be sudden. Yeah, like a hemorrhage or something like that too. Well, technically, nodules are considered a lesion too. Polyps, nodules, anything like that. But yeah, what's your background, Cornelius? I'm curious. You seem to be very knowledgeable at this. I heard the falsetto is just the edges of the chords vibrating and nothing else. Yeah, the for the most part, that from what my understanding is that the TA is pretty much inactive at that point in a falsetto production. But again, how are we defining falsetto? So it depends. Let's see. Yes, that's exactly what it is. I heard falsetto. Oh yeah, there you go. How many push-ups can you do? Not very many. Not very many at all. I used to be an athlete, and I used to be like crazy powerhouse, very strong, and no longer. Someday. At least that's what M2 is. People use falsetto in different ways. Exactly. It feels very soft when I sing falsetto. Yeah. The difference between falsetto is usually less adducted, since adduction is part of what keeps you in M1. Exactly. Yep. You can do damage in falsetto, but it doesn't usually happen. No, you're more likely to do damage with an actual breathy phonation, in the sense that with falsetto, there's oftentimes a little bit more vocal fold contact as opposed to um, like a very breathy phonation that's happening all the time. Like the only way that you sing is breathy, because that can dry out the vocal folds. It can actually lead to. There was a study that was done by it wasn't Shirley Emmons. Who did this? Somebody did this a study a number of years back and found that breathy singing can very quickly lead to redness and swelling on the vocal folds, just because the mucosal lining just gets dried out, and we need that lining to be able to lubricate the vocal folds, just like the oil in your car engine, right? You need that, otherwise there's too much friction, and it can just lead to issues. So there are always ways. I think it's one of those things that just we have to be conscious and deliberate and intentional about our voice use. Um, Certain sounds that we make are not necessarily good or bad, but we have to watch how we make them and how often we're making them. Let's see. Oh, I think I missed something. All right, I'm gonna have to wrap up, guys. So I'm probably not gonna take any more questions after this. But let's see. So learn to manipulate formants by twanging and opening the mouth more, which does not cause the kind of tension when you don't need to let go the vowel anymore. Yeah. There's more than one way to approach things, though. You can be very right-brained and cerebral, or more creative and spontaneous in your outlook, and still achieve the same result. Absolutely. Singing is definitely more intuitive for some people too. Um, yeah, and I think, Cornelius, I think that's one of the things with the singing teacher is that if the singing teacher has any understanding, I think, of how to get the voice to function properly, but also how to tune resonances, I think that can really help the student learn things a lot faster and accomplish his or her goals a lot sooner. Because, like I know, for example, how to manipulate the first formant and the second formant. I know what little tricks to use and what to do with vowels and that sort of thing. Whereas, there's nothing wrong with trial and error, but some people will continue to try and try and try and try and just not be able to find that spot. And so sometimes when you find a good singing teacher and that singing teacher just says, "Hey, do this," and you do it, and all of a sudden something just clicks. And that's really what singing teacher is there for, is to kind of help you figure things out and to do it in a way that's healthy and usually faster than trying to learn on your own. Let's see. You guys are very chatty today. Cornelius, I think it's you. I think you are keeping everybody engaged. So thank you. I don't think I've seen you before. Have you been on there? I don't think you've chatted with us before. I'm not talking so much about the approach to learning or doing it. I'm talking about what happens in the body. You can do this either by trying to understand the mechanism precisely, or you can do it by creative metaphors and get the same results, but the bodily function is the same. Absolutely. Yeah, that's why sometimes when you buy, I've talked about this in a number of videos before about bypassing our conscious brains, and sometimes just making sounds that are just kind of primal, or just sounds that we make on a regular basis, like even things like crying and moaning and what have you. It's interesting, whimpering, how it gets you into a twang and it gets you into thin edge function, and without you thinking about it. But there's things that you do all the time and you know how to do those sounds. And sometimes when you start thinking about, I'm going to be a witch, oh, look, you just twanged. Things like that, where it's like you're not thinking, okay, I need to narrow the area of the glottis and I need to shorten. Like you're not thinking that. You're not thinking about the precise mechanical aspects of it. You're just thinking about the sound, and it's a sound that you're familiar with already. So I agree with you absolutely that we sometimes just need to shut off our brains and just do what is intuitive and comes naturally. Did I miss your question about trilling? I did miss your question. Sorry, there's so much like conversation. Um, I don't know what the question was about trilling. I'm afraid to go back and try to look because there's so much dialogue going on here that please feel free to retype it for me. I find it helpful because it makes me better able to communicate with my voice teacher. Oh yes, probably understanding a little bit about the mechanism of it. Gosh. I think my husband is doing work outside the window here. It's getting too dark for that though. I would like to ask you for some advice about singing the E vowel in M1 on F sharp 4 for a guy. Ooh, okay. Let's see. How to make it sound effortless like Adam Levine. Although Adam Levine's voice is kind of interesting and he's got a very Yeah, I would say that he kind of distorts his vowels a fair bit. Actually, they're not really speech-like, but changing the vowel to A is usual advice. Anything else? Yeah. So one of the things I'm wondering how you're approaching that F sharp is if you're singing it acoustically open or acoustically closed, because that makes a huge difference. If you're acoustically closing the voice, that is allowing the second harmonic to pass the first formant. More information than you need, but basically by stabilizing the tube length, the length of the vocal tract, thereby allowing the harmonics to continue rising past this formant rather than like raising the formant continuously by shortening the vocal tract, etc. I'm sorry, I'm just like rushing through this right now. But if you're singing an acoustically closed, which is when you stabilize the first form and allow the second harmonic to rise above it, you can actually sing a fairly pure E that will still continue to sound like an E because you're stabilizing the vocal tract, you're keeping the tongue virtually the same. You may lower at the jaw at some point, maybe at F sharp, depending on the singer, depending on your voice type. Um, but if you are trying to sing in an open voice where you're tracking that first formant with the second harmonic and just kind of going up and up and up and up, that's a different story. And what you probably need to do there is modify to an I first. So beat, bit. And the reason why you're doing that is because you're just basically singing a vowel that has the next highest first formant. And then I would go to like an A or E, but then you start to really distort the vowel. And is that what you want artistically? Do you like diction wise as well? Like, do you want the vowel to not sound like an E anymore? It sounds like you want it to sound like an E, and so that's where you need to learn to be able to acoustically close the voice. I think it's really I'll say your only option. I won't say it's not necessarily your only option, but it really is the most effective option would be to and I'm sorry, I'm not going to demonstrate this. I did talk about this in a couple of videos, and I have those interviews with like Ken Bozeman, for example. I interviewed him about this idea of closed voice and stabilizing the tube length, and he talks about like he has a soprano, I think, on that video where he shows how when she lowers the jaw as she gets to the top of the staff, and I think this is applicable to guys to some extent too. Your harmonics are a little closer together in that fourth octave range than they are in the fifth. But when she starts to lower the jaw, she fronts and elevates the tongue just a little bit to keep it in that E posture. What defines the E is that high fronted tongue posture, and it's considered a close vowel, not closed, but close vowel, because of the tongue body's distance or closeness to the roof of the mouth. So linguistically, that's how it's defined. So if you are opening your mouth wider, what's happening is the tongue is going down with the jaw, right? So then your vowel's going to kind of modify passively. Not in the Ken Bozeman definition of passively, but it becomes modified because that as the jaw lowers, the tongue pulls away from the roof of the mouth. So then the vowel becomes more I, and then it modifies to A and E. But if you instead can try fiddling around with that, try fronting the tongue, try elevating it just a little bit and see what happens. And we're not talking like really fronted, really like sticking out odd posture, but just a little tiny bit of that, you may find that you can get something that sounds much closer to a real E, pure E, than if you try to do things like an E or A and just completely change the vowel, completely modify it actively. Yeah, hopefully that helps. I would fiddle around with that, and I would learn to be able to stabilize the larynx to see if you can acoustically close off. I teach open and closed voice to all of my CCM students because I feel like there is a benefit to both. To me, open voice is more belty. It tends to get louder. Whereas if you want to keep some of the warmth and richness in the sound, you can acoustically close the voice, still maintain a fair bit of brightness and speech likeness so that it doesn't sound quite like a Pavarotti sound. It's not a really classical sound. So there are so many different little manipulations and little tweaks you can make to create the sound that you actually want without trying to like force it. That helps. See the TAs, not the TAs, the I's. I don't know if you're referring to somebody else.
The medical computer might call something falsetto even though it is M1, which you'd almost never see in a singer. Right, right. Got a quick question. A mate of mine is a professional singer, and she always refuses to share mouth-to-mouth kisses with her boyfriend a few days before. Oh, Cockney rebel! Why are you asking me this? What's all that about? I don't know. Do you want to pass germs back and forth and get sick before your performance? I don't know. Like, stay away from me, people. Stay away. All right. Probably exactly. She's probably worried about like colds and what have you. I mean, I know some people, some singers who are extremely cautious leading up to performances because they tend to be very prone to catching things, everything that's going around. I'm like the opposite. I mean, I don't catch just about everything. Like, I mean, it'll be like 3 years between colds for me. And even then, it's like a day and a half of just post nasal drainage, and that's it. I don't even get like the stuffy nose, runny nose, any of that. So I'm like, I have a really robust, I don't know how it happened, I have a really robust immune system, but some people are just especially if it's they're professionals, they're very cautious about it. I know some singing teachers who have very strict policies that their students are not to come into lessons, period, if they have any kind of cold, sniffle, cough, anything, because they're just too prone, and then they need it. It's their livelihood, they need to. So oftentimes singing teachers are also performers, and so they've got gigs coming up, and they just can't afford the downtime. So yeah, I mean, I could definitely be like, okay, stay away from me. um, yeah, let's see. Okay. There's lots of comment here. Probably yeah, there's okay. I'm gonna have to. I'm sorry. I'm gonna probably have to skim through like it's a Canadian singer singing in Canadian accent. Hey, we don't have a Canadian accent. I sound just as American as the next Canadian. All right. Do you use a practical what? You can use practically any accent. The vowel modifications are primarily to preserve the vowel quality, not to change it. Um, wow, this is a long live stream, guys. I suppose that you should have been common sense. That's all right. That's kind of fun. I think we're having a good time today, though. Ooh, you guys are chatty. All right. I think we're at the end, and I'm sorry, Cornelius, if I missed your question about trills. Trilling. I don't know if you're talking about like the musical trilling, the agility kind of trilling, or if you're talking about like or that kind of thing. Um, I'm throwing up. Oh, bad for the vocal folds. Yeah, feel free to leave the question now. I think I'm right at the end there. Musical trilling. Oh yes. Okay. So hold on, Nicholas. Throwing up. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, it's. I mean, the esophagus is not the same tube, right, as the trachea. But when you're throwing up, I mean, it's depends on what goes on there. Like I think you're more likely to have something like reflux, that kind of where it sort of kind of comes up and then sort of ends up going into the vocal folds. Reflux can cause a lot of damage to the vocal folds. Like you'll actually see pitting from like acid burns, basically from the stomach acid. That's more likely to cause damage, I think, because it's reflux tends to be an ongoing thing, whereas throwing up once or twice, it's probably not going to cause damage. But if you have an issue where, as with reflux, where the epiglottis doesn't fold over properly to protect the airway, then you could very well end up with some a little bit of injury to the vocal folds, but it'll be very temporary. I haven't heard all that much R&B. What is your favorite 80s metal high note hitter? I don't know if you're referring to me or I'd have to think about that. Like how classical singers do, I think, but maybe it's also done in R&B. I'm like going backwards here, which is probably not the right way to go. Like Baroque trills. Um, hmm. All I know what to say about that, because we're not dealing with a specific trill or something, a specific example that I can look at, is just the trilling is just basically it's an ornament, that we add to music to kind of just instead of it just kind of sitting on one note, you just add like this little tiny ornament. And when you do it, it usually requires a bit of agility because they're usually pretty fast. So you have to be able to make sure you're not weighing down the voice too much. Um, the Who's her? I'm missing. Oh, Ann Wilson. Okay. All right, guys. We've been going at this for over an hour and a half. That's a really, really long live stream today. But good. Good. It's really good hanging out with you guys, and I love all the chatting that's happening. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. And it's nice to see some new names in our chat section here. And thank you so much, Janet, for moderating. Thankfully, there wasn't much that you had to do today, but thank you. Seems to be a wider vibrato. Okay, I will let you guys continue chatting, and I will say good night. And I will see everyone. Oh, thank you, James. And James, I will see you at some point soon. And let me see. I always have to figure out how to actually end the stream. All right. Have yourselves a good month. I know I only do this once a month. I'm going to start doing this more often because I should. I should just do this more often. But yeah, so have yourselves a really good month, and I will see you soon. Bye.